grabbed their attention immediately. Before you watch this incredible story about a man who was judged by his appearance and then shocked everyone with his true identity, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the moment when the truth is revealed and justice is served. Hit the notification bell to stay updated. Asterisk, asterisk. It was a Tuesday evening at the prestigious Riverside Country Club in Manhattan. Thomas Wilson, a man dressed in a worn shirt and faded jeans, walked into the club's main restaurant. He looked out of place among the wealthy businessmen and women in their designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Thomas had come to the restaurant to have dinner with his estranged daughter, Rebecca. They hadn't spoken in 3 years. He was hoping for a reconciliation. But what happened instead was public humiliation. Rebecca's new friends, wealthy Manhattan elites, saw Thomas and immediately began to mock him. They made cruel comments about his appearance, his clothes, and his obvious poverty. They laughed at him. They suggested he had stolen Rebecca's credit card and was trying to use her money. Rebecca, embarrassed by her father, joined in the mockery. She told Thomas to leave. She told him that she was ashamed of him. Thomas left quietly. But what none of them knew was that Thomas Wilson was not a poor man. He was one of the wealthiest people in New York. And what happened next would shock all of them in ways they could never have anticipated. Build the story slowly and clearly. Thomas Wilson had built a life that very few people understood. 40 years ago, when Thomas was just 25 years old, he had invented a technology that would eventually become the foundation of modern encryption security. This technology had been licensed to every major tech company in the world. Over 4 decades, it had generated billions of dollars in royalties. Thomas had also made wise investment decisions. He had invested in tech startups that had become massively successful. He had invested in real estate. He had invested in renewable energy companies. By the age of 65, Thomas's net worth was approximately $8 billion. But Thomas had made a conscious decision about how he wanted to live his life. He had seen what wealth had done to many other wealthy people. He had seen how it corrupted them. He had seen how it isolated them. He had seen how it caused him to lose touch with what mattered in life. So Thomas had made a choice. He had decided to live simply. Thomas had donated $4 billion to charity. He had established the Wilson Foundation, which funded education for underprivileged children. He had funded medical research. He had funded homeless prevention programs. He had supported environmental conservation. With his remaining $4 billion, Thomas lived modestly. He donated most of his annual income to charity as well. He lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn. He drove a 15-year-old Honda. He wore simple clothes that he had owned for years. To anyone who looked at him, Thomas appeared to be poor or middle class at best. No one suspected that he was one of the wealthiest people in the world. Thomas's family had not been happy with his choices. Thomas had been married to a woman named Margaret for 35 years. Margaret had wanted to live a life of luxury. She had wanted designer clothes, expensive jewelry, travel, and all the trappings of wealth. But Thomas had refused. He had told her that their money should be used to help people, not to satisfy their own desires. Margaret had been furious. When Thomas had donated the first $1 billion to charity, Margaret had threatened divorce. When he had donated the second $1 billion, she had followed through on her threat. Thomas and Margaret had been divorced for 5 years. Their settlement had given Margaret $500 million, more than enough to live a life of extreme luxury for the rest of her life. But Margaret had not been satisfied. She had become bitter about Thomas's choices. Their daughter, Rebecca, had taken her mother's side in the divorce. Rebecca had been angry with Thomas for not living the kind of wealthy lifestyle that she wanted. Rebecca had wanted to grow up as the daughter of a billionaire, living in a penthouse, attending elite private schools, and having every luxury imaginable. Instead, Thomas had sent her to public school. He had taught her the value of hard work. He had taught her compassion for people less fortunate than herself. Rebecca had resented this. She had blamed her father for her mother's unhappiness. She had blamed her father for not being the wealthy patriarch she wanted him to be. When Rebecca had turned 18, she had distanced herself from Thomas. She had gone to college with money from her mother. She had surrounded herself with wealthy friends. She had become exactly like her mother, obsessed with luxury, status, and material wealth. 3 years ago, Rebecca had cut off all contact with Thomas. Thomas had been heartbroken, but had respected his daughter's choice. He had continued his charitable work. He had continued to live simply. But recently, Thomas had been diagnosed with stage 3 heart disease. His doctor had told him that he had perhaps 5 years left, perhaps 10 if he was lucky, and if he took excellent care of himself. Thomas had realized that life was too short to remain estranged from his daughter. He had reached out to Rebecca. After 3 years of silence, she had finally agreed to have dinner with him. Thomas was hopeful. He thought that maybe they could reconcile. He thought that maybe he could repair their relationship before it was too late. This hope was what brought him to the Riverside Country Club on that Tuesday evening. Hashtag make viewers emotionally invested. Thomas arrived at the Riverside Country Club at 7 p.m. wearing the same simple clothes he always wore, a button-down shirt that was starting to show signs of wear, jeans that had faded from many washings, and worn-out shoes. He had called ahead to make sure he would be allowed in. The club had a strict dress code, but they had made an exception for him because he was Rebecca's guest. Thomas walked into the restaurant and spotted Rebecca at a table near the window. She was sitting with 3 other young women, all dressed in expensive designer clothes, all displaying the kind of casual wealth that comes from being born into money. Rebecca's face fell when she saw her father. "Dad," she said, her voice cold. "You're wearing that." "Hello, Rebecca," Thomas said, trying to remain positive. He leaned down to hug her, but she pulled away. "Don't," she said. "We're in public." Thomas sat down at the table. One of Rebecca's friends, a woman named Victoria, looked at Thomas with obvious disdain. "Who is this?" Victoria asked. "This is my father," Rebecca said, her voice filled with embarrassment. "Your father?" Another friend, named Melissa, said with a smirk. "He looks homeless." The 3 women laughed. Thomas felt his face grow warm, but he remained composed. "I'm Thomas Wilson," he said, trying to be friendly. "Nice to meet you. Did you lose your job?" Melissa asked mockingly. "Is that why you're dressed like that?" "I'm retired," Thomas said simply. "Retired from what?" "Sleeping on park benches." Victoria said, and all 3 women laughed loudly. Other people in the restaurant were starting to stare. Thomas felt deeply uncomfortable, but he tried to focus on his daughter. "Rebecca, I was hoping we could talk," Thomas said. "I know we haven't been close, but I would like to try to repair our relationship. Life is too short to..." "To what?" Rebecca interrupted. "To be embarrassed by you in public? Dad, you're humiliating me. Look at you. You're dressed like a vagrant. You show up at one of the most prestigious clubs in Manhattan, looking like you can't afford a decent meal, and you expect me to be proud of you." Thomas felt the words like daggers, but he tried to remain calm. "I understand that my appearance might not be what you expected," Thomas said, "but I hope you can understand that wealth and expensive clothes don't define a person's worth. Easy for you to say when you're poor," Melissa said. "Some of us like to actually enjoy the finer things in life. Some of us believe that helping other people is more important than material possessions." Thomas replied quietly, "That's just what poor people say to feel better about their poverty," Victoria said with a sneer. Rebecca looked deeply embarrassed. She stood up from the table. "Dad, I think you should leave," she said. "I don't think this is working." "Rebecca, please," Thomas said, standing up as well. "I know I'm not what you wanted me to be, but I'm still your father. I still love you. Can't we at least try to talk?" "How could I possibly have a father who dresses like he shops at Goodwill?" Rebecca said coldly. "I'm ashamed of you. I'm ashamed to be seen with you. Please leave." Thomas felt his heart break, but he didn't argue further. He simply nodded, said goodbye, and left the restaurant. As he was leaving, he heard Rebecca's friends laughing behind him. He heard Melissa say, "Can you believe she's related to that guy?" Thomas walked to the lobby of the country club and encountered a man he recognized. Bradford Chun, the club's manager. "Mr. Wilson, is everything all right?" Bradford asked with concern. He had recognized Thomas, though Thomas had only been to the club a few times before. "Everything is fine," Thomas said quietly. "I'm just leaving." But Bradford had seen the exchange. He had heard some of the mockery. "Sir, I want to apologize for how you were treated in there," Bradford said. "That was unacceptable. That young woman and her friends had no right to speak to you that way." "It's all right," Thomas said. "They don't know who I am. They were making assumptions based on my appearance." "Still, it was wrong," Bradford said. "Is there anything I can do for you, Mr. Wilson?" Thomas shook his head. "No, Bradford, but I appreciate your kindness." That night, Thomas went home to his small apartment. He sat alone in the darkness and wept. His daughter had rejected him. His daughter was ashamed of him. And he didn't have much time left to repair that relationship. Karma or the big reveal. The next morning, Thomas received a call from his lawyer, Margaret Stevens. "Thomas, we have a situation," Margaret said. "Rebecca has apparently been telling people that you showed up at the Riverside Country Club wearing rags, that you're poor, and that she's embarrassed to be associated with you. It's been circulating on social media." Thomas was not surprised. He had expected something like this. "What would you like me to do?" Margaret asked. Thomas thought for a moment. He had a decision to make. He could simply ignore it and let the rumors continue. Or he could set the record straight. "I want to hold a press conference," Thomas said. "I want to tell people about the Wilson Foundation. I want to tell people about my charitable work. And I want to explain why I live the way I do." "Are you sure?" Margaret asked. "That will expose your entire private life to public scrutiny. You've been private about your wealth for 40 years. This will change everything." "My private life ended the moment my daughter decided to make fun of me on social media," Thomas said. "I think it's time to tell my story." The press conference was held the following day at the offices of the Wilson Foundation in Manhattan. Thomas stood in front of dozens of journalists and cameras. He had dressed simply, as he always did. This time, however, his simple appearance carried a different meaning. "My name is Thomas Wilson," he began, "and I want to tell you about why I live the way I do. 40 years ago, I invented a technology that has generated billions of dollars in revenue. I have made wise investments that have increased my wealth significantly. I am, by most measures, one of the wealthiest people in the world. My net worth is approximately $8 billion. But I have chosen to live simply. I have chosen to donate $4 billion to charity. I have chosen to live in a small apartment in Brooklyn. I have chosen to wear simple clothes and drive an old car. I made this choice because I believe that wealth is a responsibility, not an opportunity for self-indulgence. I believe that those of us who have been blessed with abundance have a moral obligation to help those who are struggling." Thomas paused, then continued. "Yesterday, I attempted to reconcile with my estranged daughter at the Riverside Country Club. During that dinner, my daughter and her friends mocked me for my appearance and my apparent lack of wealth. They made assumptions about who I was based solely on how I looked. This is a problem that I think we all face in society. We judge people by their appearance. We judge them by their clothes, their cars, their homes. We assume that poor people are somehow less worthy than rich people. We assume that people who don't display their wealth must not have any. But the truth is far more complex. A person's worth has nothing to do with their appearance. A person's character has nothing to do with their bank account." Thomas then made an announcement that shocked everyone. "I am establishing a new initiative within the Wilson Foundation," Thomas said. "It will be called the Second Chance Initiative. This program will provide financial assistance and mentorship to people who have been judged harshly by society based on their appearance or economic status. The initiative will receive $1 billion in funding. Additionally, I am using my influence to encourage other wealthy individuals to reconsider how they think about poverty and appearance. I am calling on society to judge people by their character, not by their clothes." The press conference ended, and the story exploded across social media and news outlets. "Billionaire Thomas Wilson shocks everyone with his true identity." The headlines read. Social media erupted. People began discussing Thomas's choice to live simply and donate his wealth to charity. People began praising his message about not judging people by their appearance. And people began attacking Rebecca. Within hours, Rebecca's social media accounts were flooded with negative comments. People called her ungrateful. People called her shallow. People expressed their disapproval of how she had treated her father. More significantly, Rebecca's career was affected. Rebecca had been working as a social media influencer, making money by promoting luxury brands and lifestyles. But after the press conference, brands began distancing themselves from her. They didn't want to be associated with someone who had publicly mocked and rejected her own father. Rebecca's follower count plummeted. Her sponsorships dried up. Her income evaporated. Margaret, Rebecca's mother, was also affected. Margaret had been living a life of luxury funded by her divorce settlement and her own investments. But the public backlash was intense. She was called a gold digger. She was called a bad influence on her daughter. More significantly, however, was the business impact. Several companies that Margaret had been involved with decided to distance themselves from her because of her association with Rebecca's behavior. Margaret's reputation, which she had spent years building, was damaged in a matter of days. The Wilson Foundation's phone lines were flooded with calls from people wanting to donate money or volunteer. Thomas's message had resonated with millions of people around the world. But the most significant impact was on Rebecca. 3 weeks after the press conference, Rebecca called her father. She had been crying when she called. She had apologized profusely for how she had treated him. She had told him that she had been shallow and ungrateful. She had told him that she now understood his values and respected them. Thomas had forgiven her. He had told her that he loved her and that he was proud of her for having the courage to apologize. Thomas had also set a condition for their reconciliation. "I want you to work with me," Thomas said. "I want you to be involved with the Wilson Foundation. I want you to use your platform and your influence to help people, not to promote materialism and consumerism." Rebecca had agreed. Over the next months, Rebecca underwent a transformation. She had stopped being a luxury lifestyle influencer. Instead, she had become an advocate for charitable causes. She had started a program to help young people understand the dangers of materialism and consumerism. Rebecca had also made a significant personal sacrifice. She had donated half of her trust fund to charity. She had decided to live more modestly. She had moved out of her luxury apartment and into a smaller, more modest home. Most importantly, Rebecca had rebuilt her relationship with her father. Thomas and Rebecca began spending time together regularly. They had dinner together. They worked together on foundation projects. They talked about their dreams and their values. Thomas told Rebecca that her apology and her change meant more to him than any material possession ever could. "I know I didn't live the life you wanted me to live," Thomas said to Rebecca, "but I hope you can understand now why I made the choices I did. I hope you can understand that a good life isn't measured in expensive possessions. It's measured in relationships, in purpose, and in the impact we have on other people." "I understand now, Dad," Rebecca said. "I was so focused on what you didn't have that I couldn't see what you did have: wisdom, integrity, and genuine love. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out." 1 year after the press conference, Thomas published a book titled The Billionaire's Paradox: Why I Chose Simplicity Over Luxury. The book detailed his philosophy about wealth, his charitable work, and his relationship with his daughter. The book became a bestseller. It inspired millions of people around the world to reconsider their own values and their relationship with material possessions. More importantly, the book documented Thomas's journey with his daughter and his efforts to teach her about what truly matters in life. Several celebrities and business leaders read the book and were moved by Thomas's message. They began to establish their own charitable foundations. They began to donate significant portions of their wealth to help others. Thomas's message had sparked a movement, but the most important outcome, at least to Thomas, was his relationship with his daughter. Rebecca eventually took over the day-to-day operations of the Wilson Foundation. She brought her own creativity and energy to the work. She implemented new programs and reached new populations in need. Rebecca's transformation from a shallow, materialistic young woman to a compassionate, thoughtful advocate for charitable causes became a story in itself. She was profiled in major magazines and newspapers. When asked how she had changed so dramatically, Rebecca always credited her father. "My father showed me what real wealth is," Rebecca said in one interview. "Real wealth isn't about money or possessions. Real wealth is about having a purpose, having integrity, and having relationships that matter. My father has more wealth than most people can imagine, but he lives simply because he understands that real wealth can't be bought. It has to be earned through how you live your life and the impact you have on other people. 3 years after the original incident at the Riverside Country Club, Thomas passed away from his heart disease. His death was covered extensively in the media. News outlets ran stories about his life, his charitable work, and his impact on the world. They talked about how he had changed millions of people's perspectives on wealth and materialism. At his funeral, hundreds of people showed up, not just family and friends, but people whose lives have been changed by the Wilson Foundation's programs. There were people who had received education through the foundation. There were homeless people who had been helped by the foundation's housing programs. There were medical researchers whose work had been funded by the foundation. Rebecca delivered the eulogy. "My father was the wealthiest person I ever knew," Rebecca said through her tears. But not because of the money in his bank account. He was wealthy because of the love he gave, the impact he had on the world, and the values he stood for. He taught me that true wealth comes from giving, not from taking. He taught me that the measure of a person's life isn't how much they have, but how much they've given. I'm going to spend the rest of my life continuing his work and honoring his legacy. After Thomas's death, Rebecca continued to run the Wilson Foundation. She expanded its programs. She increased its charitable giving. By the time of her own death 40 years later, the foundation had distributed over $12 billion to charitable causes. Rebecca's children, Thomas's grandchildren, grew up understanding their grandfather's values. They too became advocates for charitable work and for helping others. Thomas's legacy lived on, touching millions of lives, inspiring thousands of people to reconsider their own values and their relationship with material possessions. The final lesson. This story teaches us something profound about judging people and about what truly matters in life. Thomas Wilson was judged by his appearance. People assumed he was poor because he didn't display his wealth. People assumed he was worthless because he didn't wear expensive clothes. People assumed he was a failure because he didn't live in luxury. But Thomas understood something that many wealthy people never understand. That material possessions are temporary. That money is a tool, not a purpose. That the true measure of a person's life is not what they have, but what they give. Rebecca initially had bought into society's message about the importance of wealth and luxury. She had been embarrassed by her father because he didn't fit the image of a wealthy person she had in her mind. But through his example and through the consequences of her own behavior, she learned the truth. She learned that a person who gives away billions of dollars to help others is richer than a person who hoards wealth for themselves. She learned that a father who loves you unconditionally is more valuable than a father who can buy you designer clothes. She learned that character and integrity matter more than money and status. The lesson for all of us is this: never judge a person by their appearance. Never assume that someone is worthless because they don't have money or don't display wealth. And never let material possessions become more important than relationships and values. True wealth is measured not in money, but in purpose, in integrity, and in the impact we have on other people's lives. If this story about the true meaning of wealth, the dangers of judging people by appearance, and the power of redemption moved you, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story that reminds us what truly matters in life. Hit the notification bell to stay updated. And in the comment below, share your thoughts about this story. What do you think truly defines wealth? Have you ever misjudged someone based on their appearance? Your perspective matters, and I'd love to hear it. Asterisk, asterisk. About this story. This story was crafted to illustrate the dangers of judging people by their appearance and material possessions, and to explore what true wealth really means. It's a reminder that a person's value has nothing to do with their bank account or what they wear. The story also shows the power of redemption and how people can change when they're confronted with the consequences of their behavior and given the opportunity to learn and grow. Most importantly, it reminds us that the legacy we leave behind is not determined by how much money we accumulate, but by the positive impact we have on other people's lives.